Ambassador Zekthari stood at the observation deck of the Velnathi diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge, watching the human colony ship New Dawn drift peacefully through the Kepler 442 system. The massive vessel, nearly 3 kilometers long, housed over 200,000 human souls seeking a new home among the stars. Children played in its parks, families shared meals in its communal spaces, and scientists worked tirelessly in its laboratories, all believing they were journeying toward a brighter future. How naive they seemed to him then. How beautifully, tragically naive. Zekthari adjusted his ceremonial robes, the purple and gold fabric catching the light from Kepler 442's twin suns. As a representative of one of the galaxy's oldest and most respected civilizations, he had witnessed first contact protocols dozens of times. The humans were relatively new to interstellar travel, having achieved faster-than-light capability only 50 years earlier. By galactic standards, they were barely out of their cradle. "The human delegation is requesting permission to board," announced his aide, a younger Velnathi named Mortis, whose enthusiasm for diplomacy still burned bright. "They're eager to discuss the terms for their settlement rights in the Outer Rim territories." Zekthari nodded, his forearms moving in a gesture of acknowledgement. The humans had been traveling for nearly 2 years, searching for a suitable world to establish their colony. The Galactic Council had been reluctant to grant them territory in the more established sectors, not out of malice, but out of concern. Humans had a reputation for being unpredictable, emotional creatures who made decisions based on feelings rather than logical analysis. The airlock hissed open, and the human diplomatic team entered the reception chamber. Leading them was Ambassador Sarah Chen, a woman in her mid-50s with graying hair and eyes that held both warmth and steel. She was flanked by Dr. Marcus Webb, their chief scientist, and Captain Elena Vasquez, the military attaché assigned to their expedition. "Ambassador Zekthari," Sarah said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. We know the Council has reservations about our expansion into this sector." Zekthari accepted the handshake, still amazed by the human custom of physical contact with strangers. Most species found such intimacy unsettling. "Ambassador Chen, the Velnathi have always believed in the potential for peaceful coexistence. Your species has shown remarkable progress in such a short time." The negotiations proceeded as expected. The humans wanted settlement rights on the 4th planet in the system, a world they had designated as Kepler 442. It was habitable, with breathable atmosphere and vast oceans, though it lay uncomfortably close to territory claimed by the Zartak Empire. The Zarthak were known for their aggressive expansionist policies and their particular disdain for what they called soft-bodied species. "The planet you've chosen," Zekthari explained delicately, "is in a strategically sensitive location. The Zarthak have expressed interest in that region for their own purposes." Dr. Webb leaned forward, his scientific curiosity evident. "What kind of purposes? Are they planning a research station?" "We'd be happy to collaborate on any scientific endeavors." The innocence in his question made Zekthari's heart's ache. The Zarthak had no interest in research. They were strip mining operations, resource extraction on a planetary scale that left worlds barren and lifeless. But how could he explain to these hopeful humans that their chosen paradise was already marked for destruction? "The Zarthak Empire operates differently than most species," he said carefully. "They prioritize resource acquisition over other considerations." Captain Vasquez, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Are you saying they're going to strip mine the planet?" Her directness caught Zekthari off guard. Perhaps humans were more perceptive than he'd given them credit for. The possibility exists. "The Galactic Council is working to negotiate a compromise that would allow for both human settlement and Zarthak interests." Sarah's expression hardened. "Compromise? Ambassador, we're talking about families, children, people who have given up everything for a chance at a new life. This isn't a business transaction." "I understand your concerns," Zekthari replied, though privately he wondered if he truly did. The Velnathi had transcended such emotional attachments millennia ago. "But we must consider the broader implications. The Zarthak Empire controls 17 star systems. They have significant political influence. And we have 200,000 people looking for a home," Sarah said, her voice rising slightly. "People who have already lost so much." Zekthari tilted his head, a gesture of curiosity among his people. "Lost? I was under the impression your expedition was voluntary." The 3 humans exchanged glances, and Zekthari sensed undercurrents of pain he hadn't expected. Dr. Webb cleared his throat. "Ambassador, May I ask what you know about the situation on Earth? I know that your species has achieved significant technological advancement, and that overpopulation concerns led to the development of your colonization programs, Zektari replied. Standard expansion patterns for developing civilizations. Captain Vasquez let out a bitter laugh. Overpopulation. Is that what they're calling it in the official reports? Sarah placed a restraining hand on the captain's arm. What Captain Vasquez means is that our departure from Earth was more complicated than simple expansion. We're refugees, Ambassador. Earth is dying. The words hit Zektari like a physical blow. Dying? Our intelligence reports indicated no immediate threats to your homeworld. Climate collapse accelerated beyond our ability to compensate, Dr. Webb explained, his scientific demeanor cracking to reveal deep anguish. Rising sea levels, extreme weather patterns, agricultural failure on a global scale. We estimate Earth has maybe 10 years before it can no longer support human life. The revelation recontextualized everything. These weren't ambitious colonists seeking fortune among the stars. They were survivors, carrying the hopes of their entire species on their shoulders. Zektari found himself looking at Ambassador Chen with new eyes. The weight of responsibility she carried would have crushed most beings. How many more ships are coming? He asked quietly. 47, Sarah replied. Nearly 12 million people in total. But only if we can establish successful colonies, only if we can prove that humanity has a future beyond Earth. The enormity of it overwhelmed Zektari. He had been treating this as a routine territorial dispute, a minor inconvenience to be negotiated away with careful diplomacy. But these humans weren't just asking for land. They were begging for the right to exist. The Galactic Council needs to understand the full scope of your situation, he said. If I present this information to them... An alarm began blaring throughout the ship. Emergency lights bathed the reception chamber in harsh red light as Mortis burst through the doors, his usual composure shattered. Ambassador, we're receiving emergency transmissions from the human colony ship. They're under attack! The words seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Zektari rushed to the communication console, the humans close behind him. The main viewer activated, showing the new dawn in the distance. But something was wrong. The ship's hull was riddled with scorch marks and debris was venting into space. Smaller vessels swarmed around it like predators circling wounded prey. Zarthak attack cruisers. Captain Vasquez identified, her military training taking over. They're not trying to capture the ship. They're trying to destroy it. Sarah was frantically trying to establish communication with her people. New Dawn, this is Ambassador Chen. Please respond. New Dawn, do you copy? Static filled the channel for several agonizing seconds before a young voice broke through, barely controlled panic evident in every word. Ambassador Chen, this is Lieutenant Rodriguez. The Zarthak opened fire without warning. They're targeting the civilian sections first. We have thousands of casualties. Families, children, they're not even giving us a chance to surrender. The color drained from Sarah's face. Are the evacuation pods operational? They're shooting them down, Rodriguez replied, his voice breaking. Any ship that tries to leave gets vaporized. They're not taking prisoners, Ambassador. They're committing genocide. Dr. Webb grabbed Zektari's arm with surprising strength. You have to stop this. Your ship has weapons, doesn't it? Zektari felt paralyzed by the magnitude of the situation. Aye. The Harmony's Edge is a diplomatic vessel. We have defensive capabilities, but we're not equipped for combat against Zartak cruisers. Then call for help, Sarah shouted. Contact the Galactic Council. The Vel-Nathi fleet, someone. Communications are being jammed, Mortis reported, his hands flying over the control panels. The Zarthak are blocking all long-range transmissions. We're cut off. On the viewer, they watched in horror as another section of the human ship erupted in flames. The New Dawn was dying, and everyone aboard it was dying with it. 200,000 souls, extinguished like candles in a hurricane. Captain Vasquez was studying the tactical display with professional intensity. They're using a standard Zarthak elimination pattern. Disable the engines first, then target life support systems to maximize suffering. They want the dying to take as long as possible. Why? Dr. Webb whispered, tears streaming down his face. What's the point? If they want the planet, why not just demand we leave? Zektari knew the answer, and it made his stomach churn. The Zarthak didn't just want the humans gone. They wanted them gone in the most brutal way possible, as a message to any other species that might dare to challenge their territorial claims. It was psychological warfare on a galactic scale. But as he watched the human delegation's reaction to their people's slaughter, Zakhtari began to sense something he hadn't expected. Where he anticipated despair and collapse, he saw something else taking root. Sarah's tears were drying up, replaced by a cold focus that sent shivers through his exoskeleton. Webb's scientific curiosity was transforming into something darker, more calculating, and Captain Vasquez was smiling. Not with joy or madness, but with the terrible smile of a predator that had finally been given permission to hunt. "Ambassador Zakhtari," Sarah said, her voice now completely steady, "I need you to understand something about humanity. We are not the peaceful, naive species your reports might suggest. We have survived ice ages, plagues, wars that consumed continents, and our own planet turning against us. We have endured every horror the universe could throw at us." She turned to face him, and Zakhtari was shocked by the transformation he saw. The diplomat was gone, replaced by something primal and frightening. "What we've never done," she continued, "is forgive those who murder our children." The transmission from the New Dawn cut to static as the ship's final systems failed. 200,000 lives, gone in minutes. Zakhtari expected the humans to break down, to collapse under the weight of their loss. Instead, Captain Vasquez began making calculations on her personal device. Webb started asking detailed questions about Zartak technology and weaknesses, and Sarah Chen stood perfectly still, staring at the wreckage of her people's dreams with eyes that promised retribution. "The 47 other colony ships," she said quietly. "They'll be here in 6 months. By then, I want every Zarthak in this system to be dead. Not captured, not negotiated with. Dead." Zakhtari felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's life support systems. "Ambassador Chen, surely you can't mean... I mean exactly what I said." She turned to him, and he saw something in her eyes that he would never forget. It wasn't anger or grief, though both were present. It was certainty. The absolute certainty of a species that had decided another species needed to cease existing. "You wanted to know about humanity's potential for peaceful coexistence," she said. "You're about to learn about our potential for something else entirely." As the debris of the New Dawn continued to drift through space, Zakhtari realized that the galaxy was about to receive an education in a subject no species had fully understood until now. The war that was coming would reshape everything, and Ambassador Zakhtari, despite every instinct screaming at him to flee, knew he would stay to witness it all. Someone had to record what happened when a young species finally showed the galaxy what they were truly capable of. Someone had to bear witness to humanity's fury. The aftermath of the massacre brought an eerie silence to the Harmony's edge. Ambassador Zakhtari watched the human delegation with growing unease as they transformed before his eyes. The diplomatic pleasantries that had dominated their earlier conversation seemed to belong to a different lifetime, though barely an hour had passed since the Zarthak attack began. Sarah Chen stood at the main communications console, her fingers dancing across unfamiliar Velnathi interfaces with surprising adaptability. She had requested access to long-range sensors, claiming she needed to verify the complete destruction of the New Dawn. But Zakhtari suspected her motives ran deeper than grief-stricken confirmation. "The Zarthak fleet is withdrawing to the outer system," Captain Vasquez reported, studying the tactical displays with professional detachment. "Standard victory formation, they're not expecting retaliation." Dr. Webb looked up from a datapad where he'd been taking extensive notes. "How many ships in their attack formation?" 12 cruisers, probably around 15,000 personnel total, Vasquez replied. "Why?" The scientist's expression had taken on an unsettling intensity. "I want to know exactly how many of them we need to kill." The casual way he said it made Zakhtari's blood run cold. These humans were discussing genocide with the same matter-of-fact tone they might use to discuss the weather. He had to intervene before their grief drove them to actions that would violate every principle of civilized behavior. "Webb, surely you don't mean to suggest—" "I don't suggest anything," Webb interrupted, not looking up from his calculations. "I state facts. Those ships contain approximately 15,000 beings who just murdered 200,000 civilians. Mathematics is quite clear on what happens next." Zakhtari turned to Sarah, hoping to find some voice of reason. "Ambassador Chen, I understand your pain, but you must consider the broader implications. An attack on the Zartak Empire would be considered an act of war by the Galactic Council." Sarah's laugh was devoid of humor. The Galactic Council? The same organization that was going to negotiate a compromise with the beings who just committed genocide? The same council that classified our desperate search for survival as standard expansion patterns? She finally turned away from the console, and Zekthari was struck again by the transformation in her eyes. Where once he had seen diplomatic warmth, now there was something calculating and cold. Ambassador Zekthari, I need you to understand something about the current situation. As of 1 hour ago, humanity officially stopped caring about the Galactic Council's opinions. Mortis, who had been quietly monitoring communications, suddenly spoke up. Ambassador, I'm detecting multiple incoming signals. They're human ships. The main viewer activated, showing the edge of the system where space itself seemed to be warping and twisting. One by one, human vessels began dropping out of faster-than-light travel. But these weren't colony ships like the destroyed New Dawn. These were different. Smaller, sleeker, and distinctly military in design. That's impossible, Zekthari breathed. Our intelligence indicated that humanity had no significant military presence in this region. Captain Vasquez was smiling again, and the expression was becoming more terrifying each time Zekthari saw it. Intelligence can be misleading, Ambassador, especially when the subject doesn't want to be found. More ships continued to arrive. Zekthari counted 20, then 50, then stopped counting as the human fleet swelled to over 100 vessels. They moved with precision that spoke of extensive training and experience, taking up positions throughout the system with tactical efficiency that would have impressed even the Velnathi Navy. Who are they? He asked, though part of him dreaded the answer. Earth Defense Force, Deep Space Reconnaissance Division, Sarah replied. They've been shadowing our colony expeditions since we left Earth, maintaining operational security and providing emergency response capabilities. Webb looked up from his datapad with satisfaction. I've identified the lead Zartak vessel, the heavy cruiser Bone Render. According to our databases, its commander is war leader Krextar, who has a documented history of civilian massacres across 7 different star systems. How could you possibly have that level of detail about Zarthak military operations? Zekthari demanded. The 3 humans exchanged glances, and Captain Vasquez nodded slightly to her colleagues. Because we've been watching them, Ambassador. We've been watching all of you. The implications of her statement hit Zekthari like a physical blow. All of us? You mean, for the past 50 years, every human ship that ventured into galactic space carried surveillance equipment far beyond what we publicly acknowledged, Sarah explained. We've been cataloging military capabilities, political structures, trade routes, communication protocols, and tactical doctrines of every species we've encountered. She gestured toward the display showing the growing human fleet. Did you really think a species that survived its own planet's attempts to kill it would venture into a hostile galaxy without insurance? The communication system crackled to life, and a new voice filled the chamber. It was crisp, professional, and utterly without emotion. This is Admiral Catherine Morrison of the EDF vessel Retribution. Ambassador Chen, I'm sorry for your loss. The New Dawn was a good ship with good people. Thank you, Admiral, Sarah replied, her diplomatic mask slipping back into place for a moment. What's our tactical situation? Complete superiority in the system, Morrison responded without hesitation. The Zarthak fleet is outdated by approximately 30 years, and their tactical doctrine assumes they're facing species that fight according to Galactic Council conventions. They have no idea what's about to happen to them. Doctor? Webb leaned toward the communications pickup. Admiral, this is Dr. Webb. I need confirmation that we have 0 survivors from the New Dawn. Confirmed, Doctor. We conducted full-spectrum sweeps of the debris field. The Zarthak made sure there were no escape pods, no emergency shelters, no chance of rescue. They wanted total extinction. The scientist nodded grimly. Then Protocol 7 is authorized. Zekthari had never heard of Protocol 7, but the way the humans said it made his skin crawl. What is Protocol 7? Captain Vasquez answered, her voice taking on the tone of someone reciting military doctrine. Total warfare doctrine developed during Earth's final conflicts. When facing an enemy that demonstrates genocidal intent against civilian populations, all conventional rules of engagement are suspended. Zekthari struggled to find words. That's barbaric. Civilized species don't engage in total warfare. Civilized species don't murder children for territorial expansion, Sarah shot back. But since the Zarthak have chosen to operate outside the boundaries of civilization, we'll meet them on their own terms. Admiral Morrison's voice returned over the communications channel. Ambassador, we're ready to proceed on your authorization. But I need to confirm. You understand what this means? Once we start down this path, there's no going back. The galaxy will never see humanity the same way again. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at the debris field that had once been the hopes and dreams of 200,000 people. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of absolute finality. Admiral Morrison, you are hereby authorized to demonstrate to the Zarthak Empire exactly what happens when they murder human civilians. Make sure the lesson is memorable. Understood, Ambassador. All units, this is Admiral Morrison. Execute Operation Righteous Fury. I say again, execute Operation Righteous Fury. The transformation of the human fleet was immediate and terrifying. Ships that had seemed to drift aimlessly through space suddenly burst into coordinated motion. Zektari watched in fascination and horror as they deployed in formations he didn't recognize, using tactical patterns that seemed to ignore conventional military wisdom. They're moving too fast, Mortis observed, monitoring the sensor readings. Their acceleration rates are exceeding safe parameters for most known species. Captain Vasquez glanced at the display and shrugged. Humans can tolerate higher G-forces than most species. We spent millions of years as persistence hunters chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We're built for endurance and stress tolerance. The Zarthak fleet had finally detected the human ships and was scrambling to respond. Their formation was textbook perfect, exactly what any military academy would teach for engaging an unknown fleet. They were positioning themselves for a conventional engagement, trying to maximize their firepower advantage while minimizing their exposure to enemy weapons. It was exactly the wrong response. The human ships split into smaller groups, abandoning formation discipline in favor of chaotic, seemingly random attack patterns. They struck from multiple angles simultaneously, using speed and unpredictability to compensate for their smaller numbers. This is madness, Zekthari murmured, watching the tactical display. They're abandoning every principle of fleet combat. No, Dr. Webb corrected, his eyes fixed on the battle. They're applying principles the Zarthak have never encountered. Human military doctrine was developed during our most desperate conflicts, when survival meant adapting faster than your enemy could respond. The first Zarthak cruiser exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Then another. The human ships were using weapons that Zekthari didn't recognize, energy patterns that his instruments couldn't properly analyze. What kind of weapons are those? He asked, pointing at the sensor readings. Classified, Captain Vasquez replied with a cold smile. But I will say this. 50 years of pretending to be a peaceful species gave us plenty of time to develop technologies that nobody expected us to have. A Zarthak communication burst through the jamming, desperate, and panicked. Human ships, cease your attack. We demand you follow proper military protocols. You cannot simply... The transmission cut off as another cruiser disappeared in fire and debris. Admiral Morrison's voice replaced it on the channel. Attention Zarthak vessels. This is Admiral Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. You have murdered civilians under our protection. There will be no quarter asked and none given. You may surrender and die quickly, or continue fighting and die slowly. Those are your only options. The response was immediate and predictable. The Zarthak war leader's voice filled with rage and indignation. You dare make demands of the Zarthak Empire? We are the conquerors of 17 star systems. We do not surrender to inferior species. Then you will serve as an example, Morrison replied, her voice carrying no emotion whatsoever. All units, weapons free. Show them what humanity learned during the resource wars. What followed was unlike anything Zekthari had witnessed in his centuries of diplomatic service. The humans didn't simply destroy the Zarthak ships. They dismantled them with surgical precision, targeting specific systems to maximize crew casualties while keeping the vessels nominally intact. They're not trying to win quickly, he realized with growing horror. They're trying to make it last. Every Zarthak on those ships needs to understand exactly what they brought upon themselves, Sarah said, her eyes never leaving the display. Fear is a more effective teacher than death, but only if you live long enough to spread the lesson. Ship after ship fell to the human assault. The Zarthak fought with desperate courage, but they were fighting an enemy that had never bothered to inform the galaxy about their true capabilities. Every tactical doctrine, every strategic assumption, every bit of intelligence the Zarthak possessed about humanity was proving catastrophically wrong. The final Zarthak vessel, the heavy cruiser Bonerender, found itself alone and surrounded. War leader Krekstar's voice crackled over the communication system, no longer arrogant but not quite broken. Human ships, we invoke the Galactic Accords. Military combatants have the right to honorable surrender. Dr. Webb leaned toward the communications pickup again. War leader Krekstar, this is Dr. Vikase Pendo, Marcus Webb of the colony ship New Dawn. You murdered my colleagues, my friends, and 200,000 civilians who posed no military threat whatsoever. You fired on evacuation pods containing children. The scientist's voice remained perfectly calm, which somehow made it more terrifying than any scream of rage could have been. The Galactic Accords apply to conflicts between civilized species. You have demonstrated that you are not civilized. Therefore, you are not protected by civilized conventions. Wait, please, the Bone Render vanished in a flash of light that outshone both of Kepler 442's suns. Silence fell across the system. Where moments before there had been a Zarthak fleet of 12 cruisers, now there was only debris and the lingering radiation signatures of destroyed ships. 15,000 beings gone in less than 30 minutes. Admiral Morrison's voice returned, professional and matter-of-fact. Ambassador Chen, the immediate threat has been neutralized, deploying search and rescue operations to confirm 0 survivors among the Zartak forces. Confirmed 0 survivors? Zekthari repeated weakly. You're going to make absolutely certain that no one escaped? Captain Vasquez nodded. Standard Protocol 7 procedures. We can't allow anyone to return to Zartak space with intelligence about our actual capabilities. Better to let them think this was an isolated incident for as long as possible. Sarah was already moving toward the communications console again. Admiral Morrison, what's the status of the other colony fleets? All 47 ships are accounted for and secure. We've been running silent escort operations since they departed Earth. After today's events, recommend accelerating settlement timeline and upgrading escort protocols. Agreed. How long until you can establish secure perimeter around Kepler 442d? 72 hours for basic defensive positions, 2 weeks for comprehensive fortification. The Zarthak Empire will probably send investigative forces once this fleet fails to report in. Sarah smiled, and Zekthari realized he was seeing yet another facet of humanity he hadn't known existed. Let them come. It's time the galaxy understood that humanity is no longer asking permission to exist. As the human ships began their systematic destruction of Zarthak debris to eliminate all traces of the battle, Zekthari found himself staring at the 3 humans who had just orchestrated the complete annihilation of a military fleet. They were discussing colonization schedules and defensive strategies with the same calm professionalism they had shown during their diplomatic negotiations. But everything had changed. The humans who had boarded his ship as refugees seeking sanctuary were now revealed as members of a species that had been preparing for galactic warfare since their first day among the stars. Their apparent naivety had been a carefully constructed illusion, hiding capabilities and intentions that would reshape the entire balance of galactic power. Ambassador Zekthari, Sarah said, drawing him from his thoughts. I need you to carry a message back to the Galactic Council. He nodded numbly, already dreading what she might say. Tell them that humanity appreciates their past hospitality, but we will no longer be seeking their approval for our expansion efforts. Tell them that any species that threatens human civilians will receive the same response as the Zarthak fleet. She paused, ensuring he was paying attention. And tell them that if they choose to interfere with our settlement of this system, they will discover that what happened here today was just a small demonstration of our actual capabilities. As Zekthari watched the last pieces of the Zarthak fleet fade into cosmic dust, he realized that the galaxy had just witnessed the emergence of something unprecedented. A species that combined advanced technology with absolute ruthlessness, diplomatic sophistication with unlimited capacity for violence. The humans hadn't just destroyed a fleet, they had announced their intention to rewrite the rules that govern civilized space, and they had the power to enforce their new rules whether the galaxy approved or not. 3 weeks after the destruction of the Zarthak fleet, Ambassador Zekthari found himself standing before the Galactic Council, struggling to convey the magnitude of what he had witnessed. The great chamber hummed with the voices of representatives from dozens of species, each more skeptical than the last about his account of humanity's hidden capabilities. 15,000 trained Zarthak warriors, Counselor Veximoth of the Crystalline Collective stated, her voice resonating through her silicone-based vocal cords, eliminated by a previously unknown human military force in under 30 minutes. The mathematics alone makes such claims highly improbable. Zekthari's forearms gestured in frustration. Honored Counselor, I witnessed the engagement personally. The humans possess technologies and tactical doctrines far beyond what we have cataloged in our databases. High Counselor Thuvan of the Ethereal Assembly leaned forward in his floating meditation sphere, his gaseous form shimmering with irritation. Ambassador Zekthari, your species has served the Council with distinction for millennia. Your reputation for accuracy is beyond question, but you're asking us to believe that humanity a species that barely achieved interstellar travel 50 years ago, has somehow developed capabilities that surpass our own military forces. What I'm asking you to believe, Zekthari replied, his voice strained, is what I saw with my own eyes. The humans haven't been developing alongside us. They've been preparing for war against us. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs and clicking sounds as various species processed this information. Counselor Mordeth of the Hive Worlds raised one of his 6 arms to signal for attention. Even accepting your account as accurate, Ambassador, the destruction of a single Zarthak fleet hardly constitutes a galactic threat. The Empire controls 17 star systems. Their total military capability far exceeds anything a refugee population could muster. Zekthari was about to respond when the chamber's communication system activated. A priority message indicator appeared on the central display, marked with the emergency codes used only for the most urgent galactic crises. Incoming transmission from Zarthak Imperial Territory, announced the chamber's artificial intelligence. Emergency Priority Alpha. Source, War Leader Takmor, commanding the border fortress at Zerion Prime. The main viewer activated, showing a Zartak commander whose usually imposing features were twisted with something that looked disturbingly like fear. The warrior's ceremonial armor was scorched and damaged, and his background showed smoke and destruction. Galactic Council, Thakmor began, his voice hoarse. I am transmitting from what remains of the Zerion Prime defense station. 12 hours ago we were attacked by human forces, not the small reconnaissance ships we expected based on previous encounters, but a full battle fleet of unknown configuration. Thuvin's gaseous form rippled with surprise. War Leader, please clarify. Are you reporting that humanity has attacked a fortified Zarthak position? I am reporting that humanity has destroyed a fortified Zarthak position, Takmor corrected grimly. Zerion Prime was defended by 36 cruisers, 8 dreadnoughts, and a planetary defense network that has never been breached in 3 centuries of operation. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Zerion Prime was legendary among galactic military analysts as an impregnable fortress, the cornerstone of Zarthak defensive strategy. The human fleet appeared without warning, Thakmor continued. No faster-than-light signatures, no advanced detection, no opportunity for our forces to prepare. They struck simultaneously at 17 different targets across the system, using coordinated attacks that demonstrated complete knowledge of our defensive capabilities. Counselor Veximoth's crystalline form began to vibrate with agitation. War Leader, how many human ships participated in this attack? Unknown. Our tactical sensors detected different human signatures at each engagement point, but the ships themselves seemed to phase in and out of detectable space. Some kind of stealth technology we've never encountered before. Zekthari felt his blood cooling as the implications became clear. The humans hadn't just developed advanced weapons. They had created entirely new categories of warfare. The manner of attack was unprecedented, Takmor went on. They did not attempt to capture our facilities or claim territory. They simply destroyed everything. Ships, stations, defense platforms, and then they left. But before departing, they transmitted a message. What message? Thuvin demanded. Takmor's expression grew even more grim. The transmission was from a human female identifying herself as Admiral Morrison. She stated, and I quote, "The Zarthak Empire murdered 200,000 human civilians at Kepler 442. This response is proportional. Further actions against human interests will result in proportional escalation." The chamber exploded into chaos as representatives began speaking over each other in dozens of languages. Zekthari stood frozen, remembering Admiral Morrison's cold voice authorizing the first human attack. The humans weren't just retaliating randomly. They were conducting a calculated campaign of escalating response. Order, Thuvin commanded, his form flashing with authority. War Leader Takmor, what are your current defensive capabilities? Minimal. They targeted our command and control infrastructure first, then systematically destroyed our ability to communicate with other Zarthak systems. We're effectively cut off from the Empire, blind and helpless. The transmission began to break up with static interference. Counselors, if you have any influence with these humans, I urge you to negotiate immediately. What they demonstrated here wasn't conquest. It was a warning. And I fear what their next warning might look like. The connection terminated, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Zekthari watched as the implications sank in among the assembled representatives. Humanity hadn't just destroyed a military target. They had surgically dismantled one of the galaxy's most advanced defensive installations, demonstrated capabilities that nobody knew existed, and done it all as a measured response to previous aggression. Counselor Mordeth spoke first, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. If the humans can neutralize Xerion Prime, then no fixed defensive position in the galaxy is secure. The entire foundation of our mutual defense agreements becomes meaningless. More than that, Veximoth added, her crystalline form now vibrating with genuine fear. If they can appear and disappear without detection, then traditional fleet engagements become impossible. How do you fight an enemy you can't see coming? Thuvin's gaseous form had taken on darker hues, indicating deep contemplation. Ambassador Zektari, you mentioned that the humans seem to possess detailed intelligence about galactic military capabilities. Can you elaborate? Zektari nodded grimly. They knew specific details about Zarthak command structures, ship classifications, and tactical doctrines that should not have been available to them. Dr. Webb identified individual commanders by name and military history. Intelligence gathering on that scale requires decades of systematic effort, Mordeth observed. They've been watching us since their first contact with galactic civilization. Which means, Thuvin continued the thought, that everything we think we know about human capabilities has been carefully managed information. They've been showing us only what they wanted us to see. A new communication alert drew their attention to the chamber's secondary display. This time, the transmission was coming from deep space, source unknown. When the image resolved, Zekthari recognized Ambassador Sarah Chen, though she now wore a military uniform instead of diplomatic robes. Galactic Council, Sarah began, her voice carrying the same diplomatic courtesy that had characterized their first meeting. I am Ambassador Sarah Chen, speaking on behalf of the United Earth Colonial Administration. I understand that recent events in Zarthak space have raised questions about human intentions and capabilities. Thuvin recovered his composure first. Ambassador Chen, the Council demands an explanation for humanity's unprovoked attack on Xerion Prime. Sarah's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in her eyes. Unprovoked? Counselor Thuvin, the Zarthak Empire murdered 200,000 human civilians, including children, during a diplomatic mission to establish peaceful settlement. Our response was both proportional and restrained. Restrained? Veximoth's voice rose to a harmonic screech. You destroyed an entire star system's defensive capacity. We destroyed military targets that posed a threat to human expansion efforts, Sarah corrected calmly. We carefully avoided civilian casualties and left all habitable worlds untouched. By contrast, the Zarthak specifically targeted civilian populations with the intent to maximize suffering. The distinction sent chills through Zektari's consciousness. The humans weren't just claiming moral superiority. They were demonstrating tactical precision that allowed them to inflict devastating military damage while maintaining the ethical high ground. Ambassador Chen, Thuvin said carefully, the Council is prepared to mediate between humanity and the Zarthak Empire. We can arrange reparations for your losses and establish neutral zones to prevent future conflicts. Sarah smiled, and Zektari recognized the expression as the same terrible smile he'd seen on Captain Vasquez's face. Counselor, I appreciate your offer, but mediation is no longer appropriate. The Zarthak Empire chose to commit genocide against human civilians. That decision has consequences that extend beyond simple diplomatic resolution. What consequences? Mordeth demanded. As of 72 hours ago, humanity officially considers the Zarthak Empire to be a hostile entity requiring neutralization. We have identified 43 strategic targets across 17 star systems that support Zarthak military capacity. These targets will be eliminated according to a timetable that allows for civilian evacuation. The casualness with which she announced the planned destruction of an entire empire left the chamber speechless. Zektari found himself remembering Dr. Pazlis, Webb's cold calculations about how many Zarthak needed to die, and realized that the human response was going to be exactly as methodical and thorough as promised. You're talking about warfare on a scale that hasn't been seen in this galaxy for millennia, Thuvin whispered. We're talking about the consequences of committing genocide against human populations, Sarah replied. The Galactic Council had the opportunity to prevent this outcome by providing adequate protection for human colonization efforts. Instead, you chose to negotiate compromises with those who murder children. She paused, allowing the accusation to sink in. Humanity has concluded that the current galactic political structure is inadequate to ensure our species' survival. We will therefore be implementing our own security arrangements. Veximoth's crystalline form was now vibrating so rapidly it created an audible hum. Ambassador, you're describing a fundamental restructuring of galactic civilization. The implications extend far beyond the Zarthak conflict. The implications, Sarah agreed, include the recognition that humanity will no longer tolerate threats to our people, regardless of the political inconvenience this might cause for established powers. And if the Council attempts to intervene militarily? Thuvin asked, though his tone suggested he already feared the answer. Sarah's smile widened slightly. Counselor, you've just learned that humanity eliminated the most advanced defensive installation in Zarthak space in under 12 hours, using technologies and tactics that your military analysts didn't know existed. Are you confident that Council forces would fare better against an opponent that has been studying your capabilities for 50 years? The silence that followed stretched for long seconds. Finally, Mordeth spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What do you want from us? Recognition that humanity is no longer a junior species seeking permission to exist among the stars, Sarah replied immediately. We want acknowledgement that human territorial claims are not subject to negotiation or compromise with those who would commit genocide for convenience. She gestured beyond the transmission pickup, indicating something the Council couldn't see. And we want you to understand that the galaxy has changed, whether you approve or not. Species that threaten human civilians will face consequences they cannot survive. Political entities that fail to protect human interests will discover that they have become irrelevant to human decision-making. The transmission paused, and when Sarah continued, her voice carried a note of something that might have been regret. 50 years ago, humanity arrived among the stars hoping to find wisdom, cooperation, and peaceful coexistence. Instead, we found species willing to negotiate away our children's lives for political expedience.
That was your choice, counselors. This is ours.
The communication cut off, leaving the Galactic Council in stunned silence. Zektari looked around the chamber and saw the same realization dawning on every representative's face. The galaxy's power structure had just been fundamentally altered by a species that everyone had dismissed as naive newcomers. Counselors, Zektari said quietly, breaking the silence, I recommend we begin immediate diplomatic outreach to other human colonies. If we're going to adapt to this new reality, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Thuvin's gaseous form had taken on the deep purple hues that indicated profound concern. I fear we may have already lost that opportunity, Ambassador. The humans have been preparing for this day since they first left Earth. They know us better than we know ourselves. As the chamber slowly erupted into urgent discussions and emergency planning sessions, Zektari found himself remembering Sarah Chen's parting words during their first meeting. Humanity was about to teach the galaxy about their potential for something other than peaceful coexistence. The lesson had begun. And Zektari suspected that the destruction of Zirian Prime was only the opening statement in a much larger curriculum. 6 months had passed since humanity's declaration of independence from galactic authority, and Ambassador Zektari found himself aboard the research vessel Truthseeker, one of the few neutral ships still permitted to observe the ongoing transformation of the galaxy. What he had witnessed during those months would haunt him for the remainder of his existence. The Zarthak Empire, once considered one of the galaxy's dominant military powers, had simply ceased to exist. Not conquered, not occupied, but systematically dismantled with surgical precision that left observers struggling to comprehend the scope of human capabilities. 17 star systems that had been the foundation of Zarthak civilization now stood empty of military presence, their populations evacuated to refugee camps managed by species that had never imagined they would need to provide sanctuary for former galactic powers. Sensor contact, announced Dr. Yelandra, the Velanathi xenobiologist who had volunteered to document humanity's expansion into former Zartak territory. Human fleet elements, approximately 50 vessels, moving in standard colonization formation. Zektari moved to the observation deck, watching as the human ships approached the fourth planet in the Zarian system. Where once the mighty fortress of Zirian Prime had stood sentinel over Zarthak space, now only debris remained, a field of twisted metal that served as a monument to the futility of opposing human determination. The human colonization effort was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of the slow, cautious expansion that characterized most species' territorial growth, humanity moved with the confidence of beings who knew that no force in the galaxy could meaningfully oppose them. Colony ships arrived under the protection of military vessels that flickered in and out of detectable space, their stealth capabilities still a mystery that galactic intelligence agencies had failed to penetrate. They're not just establishing settlements, observed Captain Mordick, the Truth Seeker's commanding officer. They're creating fortress worlds. Look at those defensive installations. The main viewer zoomed in on the planet's surface, revealing construction activity on a scale that defied conventional understanding of colonization timelines. Massive defense platforms were rising from the planet's crust as if the ground itself was being reformed into weapons of war. Energy barriers shimmered across the sky, creating a protective dome that pulsed with unknown technologies. How are they building so quickly? Dr. Yolandra wondered aloud. Those installations would take our best engineering corps years to construct. Zektari had a theory, though. It was one that made him deeply uncomfortable. Because they're not building from scratch. They're implementing plans they developed decades ago, using technologies they had been refining since before they left Earth. The evidence supported his hypothesis. Every human colony established in former Zarthak space followed identical defensive patterns, utilized the same energy signatures, and achieved operational status within days rather than months. This wasn't improvised expansion. It was the execution of a long-term strategic plan that had been waiting for the right moment to unfold. A communication request chimed through the ship's systems, and Zektari was surprised to see a familiar face appear on the viewer. Admiral Catherine Morrison looked exactly as she had during the destruction of the Zarthak fleet, her expression professional and utterly without compromise. Captain Mortick, this is Admiral Morrison. You are currently observing the establishment of New Geneva Colony in the Zirian system. Your vessel has been cleared for neutral observation status, but I need to inform you of certain restrictions on your activities. Captain Mordick straightened in his command chair. Admiral, we are operating under the authority of the Galactic Council's Scientific Exchange Protocol. Our mission is purely observational. Morrison's smile was polite, but carried undertones that made Zektari's skin crawl. Captain, the Galactic Council no longer has authority in human-controlled space. However, we respect the scientific integrity of your mission and will permit your observations under the following conditions. She gestured to something off-screen, and the viewer split to show a star map highlighting dozens of systems throughout the former Zarthak Empire. Your vessel may observe colonization efforts and defensive preparations, but you are prohibited from approaching within 10 astronomical units of any human military installation. You will not attempt to scan or analyze human technologies, and you will not transmit real-time intelligence data to any galactic government. The restrictions were reasonable, but carried implications that sent chills through Zektari's consciousness. Morrison wasn't just establishing observation protocols. She was demonstrating that human authority extended across multiple star systems, with the capability to monitor and control the activities of neutral vessels across vast distances. Admiral, Dr. Yolandra interjected, may I ask about the status of Zarthak's civilian populations? Our last intelligence reports indicated massive refugee movements. Morrison's expression softened slightly, revealing a hint of the humanity that existed beneath her military bearing. Yolandra, all Zarthak civilians have been evacuated from contested systems and relocated to neutral worlds with full resource support for rebuilding their lives. No human military action has deliberately targeted non-combatants. What about the Zarthak military leadership? Captain Mortick asked. The momentary softness vanished from Morrison's features. The military command structure that authorized genocide against human civilians has been eliminated. Individual soldiers who surrendered and renounced their allegiance to the Empire have been processed and released. Those who chose to continue hostilities were dealt with accordingly. Zektari found the clinical language more disturbing than any emotional outburst could have been. Morrison was describing the systematic destruction of an entire civilization's military capacity as if she were discussing weather patterns. Admiral, if I may, Zektari said carefully, the Galactic Council is concerned about the broader implications of humanity's expansion. Other species are beginning to question whether they might face similar responses for past conflicts with human interests. Morrison studied him for a moment, and Zektari remembered their first encounter when she had authorized the destruction of the Zarthak fleet without hesitation. Ambassador Zektari, humanity's position is quite simple. Species that commit genocide against human populations will face total military defeat. Species that threaten human civilian colonies will face proportional response. Species that respect human sovereignty and the right to exist peacefully will find us to be reliable neighbors and trading partners. She paused, ensuring her next words carried maximum impact. The choice of which category any given species falls into rests entirely with their own actions. A new contact appeared on the sensor displays, causing the bridge crew to turn their attention to the tactical station. What they saw there defied immediate comprehension. A massive structure was emerging from the space near Zarian's sun, seeming to unfold from dimensions that didn't exist moments before. "What in the name of the ancestors is that?" Captain Mortok breathed. The structure was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, but its configuration was unlike anything in galactic databases. Curved surfaces reflected stellar radiation in patterns that hurt to look at directly, while appendages that might have been weapons or sensors extended in configurations that followed no recognizable engineering principles. "That," Admiral Morrison said with evident satisfaction, "is Fortress Station Alpha, the first of humanity's deep space defensive installations. It will serve as the command and control center for human expansion into this galactic sector." Dr. Yolandra was frantically taking readings, her instruments struggling to make sense of the data they were receiving. "Admiral, the energy signatures we're detecting don't match any known technology. How is that station powered?" Dr. Yolandra, "I'm afraid that information is classified above your clearance level. However, I can tell you that Fortress Station Alpha represents the culmination of human scientific advancement over the past century. We didn't spend 50 years among the stars just learning your technologies. We were developing our own." The implications were staggering. While galactic civilization had been treating humanity as a junior partner learning the basics of interstellar existence, human scientists had been creating technologies that surpassed anything the galaxy had previously seen. The humans hadn't just been hiding their military capabilities. They had been advancing beyond galactic science while maintaining the pretense of technological inferiority. "How many of these stations are you planning to construct?" Zektari asked, though he suspected the answer would be disturbing. Morrison's smile returned, carrying the same terrible certainty he'd seen when she authorized the genocide of the Zarthak fleet. "As many as necessary to ensure that no species ever again considers committing genocide against human populations a viable option." The communication terminated, leaving the bridge crew of the Truthseeker staring at the impossible structure that now dominated the Zirian system. Fortress Station Alpha pulsed with energies that their instruments couldn't properly measure, a monument to human determination and a warning to any species that might consider challenging their expanding presence. "Captain, Doctor," Yolandra said quietly, "I'm detecting similar energy signatures appearing in 17 other systems. They're activating multiple fortress stations simultaneously." The scope of human preparation became clear to Zektari in that moment. This wasn't a response to recent events. This was the execution of a plan that had been in development since humanity first learned that the galaxy contained species willing to commit genocide for territorial gain. Every diplomatic interaction, every seemingly innocent trade negotiation, every cultural exchange had been part of an intelligence-gathering operation that mapped the galaxy's weaknesses while hiding humanity's true capabilities. "How long do you think they've been planning this?" Captain Mordick asked. Zektari remembered Dr. Webb's casual mention of 50 years of surveillance, Admiral Morrison's detailed knowledge of galactic military capabilities, and Ambassador Chen's transformation from diplomat to military coordinator. "Since before they left Earth," he replied. "They knew the galaxy was dangerous before they ever traveled to the stars. Everything they've done since first contact has been preparation for this moment." As if summoned by his words, another human transmission appeared on their communication system. This time it was Dr. Marcus Webb, the scientist whose grief over the loss of the New Dawn had triggered humanity's transformation from refugees to galactic power. "Truth Seeker, this is Dr. Webb aboard the research vessel Vindication. I wanted to personally thank you for your efforts to document what's happening here. Future generations deserve to understand how we reached this point." Dr. Yolandra leaned forward eagerly. "Dr. Webb, as fellow scientists, perhaps you could help us understand some of the technologies you're deploying. The advancement in such a short time seems almost impossible." Webb's expression was sad but determined. "Dr. Yolandra, what you're seeing is an advancement in a short time. It's the revelation of advancement that took place over decades of desperate preparation. When your planet is dying and you know you'll be venturing into a hostile galaxy, you develop technologies that prioritize survival over everything else." He gestured toward something off-screen, and Zektari caught a glimpse of facilities that seemed to stretch beyond the horizon. "We didn't come to the stars as explorers or diplomats or refugees, despite what we told everyone. We came as a species preparing for war, hoping we'd never need to fight, but ready to win if combat became inevitable." "And now?" Zektari asked. Webb's smile was filled with the same terrible certainty that seemed to characterize all human expressions these days. Now we're ensuring that no species will ever again make the mistake of considering human civilians acceptable targets for genocide. The transmission ended, leaving the crew of the Truth Seeker to contemplate the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Humanity had revealed itself to be not a young species learning the ways of galactic civilization, but a mature military power that had been studying and preparing to dominate that civilization since their first day among the stars. As Fortress Station Alpha completed its deployment and began establishing defensive fields across the entire Xerian system, Zaktari realized that the galaxy he had known for centuries was gone forever. In its place was emerging something new, something shaped by human determination and human fury. A lesson in humanity's potential was nearly complete. Soon, every species in the galaxy would understand what happened to civilizations that threatened human children. And Zaktari suspected that understanding would change everything about how the galaxy conducted itself among the stars. 2 years had passed since the Xerian incident, and Ambassador Zaktari found himself once again in the chambers of the Galactic Council, though the organization bore little resemblance to the institution he had served for centuries. Where once representatives from dozens of species had gathered to debate policy and mediate conflicts, now only 17 species maintained active participation. The rest had either been absorbed into human protective territories or had retreated to isolated sectors, hoping to avoid notice. The Great Chamber itself reflected the new reality. Human observers sat in positions of honor, their presence a constant reminder that galactic policy now required human approval. Ambassador Sarah Chen, no longer wearing diplomatic robes, but instead the deep blue uniform of the Human Colonial Authority, reviewed the day's agenda with the detached professionalism of someone who knew her approval was necessary for any meaningful action. "The first item," announced High Counselor Thuven, his gaseous form now a pale reflection of its former authority, "concerns the petition from the Kathmori Republic for assistance in defending their outer colonies from Ravager incursions. The Ravagers were a nomadic species known for their brutal raids on settled worlds. Under the old galactic order, they had been a manageable threat, contained by the combined efforts of multiple species' military forces. But with the Zarthak Empire eliminated and most other military powers either neutralized or allied with humanity, the traditional defense networks had collapsed. Ambassador Chen spoke without looking up from her datapad. "The Human Colonial Authority has reviewed the Kathmori situation. We're willing to provide defensive assistance under the Standard Protection Agreement terms." Counselor Mordeth of the Hive Worlds shifted uneasily. "Ambassador, the Kathmori have expressed concerns about the comprehensive nature of human protection agreements." Chen finally looked up, and Zaktari saw the same cold calculation that had characterized her transformation after the New Dawn massacre. "Counselor Mordeth, species under human protection receive absolute security guarantees. In exchange, they agree to align their foreign policy with human interests and accept human military oversight of their defense planning." "That's not protection," whispered Counselor Veximoth, her crystalline form vibrating with barely contained outrage. "That's colonization by another name." The silence that followed was deafening. No one had dared voice such direct criticism of human policy since the Zartak elimination campaign had concluded. Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes made Zaktari's blood run cold. "Counselor Veximoth," Chen said quietly, "would you prefer the Kathmori face the Ravagers alone? Because those are the only two options currently available. Human protection with human oversight, or independence with no protection whatsoever." The terrible simplicity of the choice reflected humanity's complete transformation of galactic politics. The complex web of mutual defense agreements, trade partnerships, and diplomatic compromises that had characterized interstellar relations for millennia had been replaced by a binary system: align with human interests or face whatever threats emerged from the galaxy's darker corners without assistance. "What about the Galactic Defense Force?" Veximoth asked desperately. "Surely the combined fleets of the remaining council members could—" "Could what?" Chen interrupted. "The GDF consists of 47 ships from 9 different species, using incompatible technologies and tactical doctrines. The last time they attempted joint military action, they needed 6 weeks to coordinate a response to a single pirate base." She gestured toward the chamber's main display, which showed a tactical overview of the galaxy's current state. Red markers indicated human-controlled territory, which now encompassed nearly 30% of known space. Green markers showed human-protected worlds, adding another 20%. The remaining area was a patchwork of isolated systems and failing alliances. "The Ravager fleet that's threatening Kathmori space consists of over 200 ships using advanced combat technologies acquired from Zartak weapons caches," Chen continued. They've already destroyed 3 planetary defense networks and show no interest in negotiation or restraint. How long would human forces require to neutralize the Ravager threat? Based on previous encounters, approximately 70 to 2 hours from deployment to complete elimination of hostile forces, Chen replied without hesitation. We've been monitoring Ravager activities since they began using Zarthak equipment. Their tactical patterns are predictable. The casual confidence with which she discussed eliminating an entire fleet of raiders demonstrated how completely humanity had surpassed galactic military capabilities. What had once required the combined efforts of multiple species' naval forces could now be accomplished by human ships in less than 3 days. And the cost of this protection? Mordeth asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer would be significant. Standard terms. The Kethmori Republic agrees to coordinate their foreign policy with human interests, accepts human oversight of their military development, and provides preferred trading status for human commercial interests. Zektari found himself speaking before he fully realized his intention. Ambassador Chen, those terms essentially eliminate Kethmori sovereignty. You're asking them to become a human client state in exchange for protection. Chen turned her attention to him, and he was struck again by how completely the diplomatic warmth he remembered had been replaced by something mechanical and ruthless. Ambassador Zektari, the Kethmori are welcome to maintain their sovereignty if they prefer. But sovereign species are responsible for their own defense. She gestured toward the tactical display again, highlighting the areas where Ravager fleets were currently operating. The galaxy has become a dangerous place. Species that cannot defend themselves have 3 options: accept human protection, flee to the galactic rim and hope isolation keeps them safe, or die when stronger predators find them. The brutal honesty of her assessment sent shockwaves through the remaining council members. This wasn't the diplomatic language of negotiation and compromise. This was the voice of a species that had decided the galaxy needed to be managed rather than negotiated with. When did we become predators in your assessment? Thuven asked quietly. Chen's expression softened slightly, revealing a hint of the human being beneath the colonial administrator. Counselor Thuven, humanity doesn't consider most species to be predators, but we've learned that good intentions and peaceful philosophies don't protect children from beings who view genocide as a political tool. She stood and moved to the chamber's central platform, addressing all the assembled representatives simultaneously. The old galactic order failed to prevent the murder of 200,000 human civilians. It failed because it prioritized political compromise over moral clarity. It failed because it treated the systematic extermination of refugees as a negotiable offense. The chamber fell silent as the representatives absorbed her words. Zektari remembered the diplomatic meetings where they had indeed discussed compromise solutions to the Zarthak territorial dispute, treating the potential for mass civilian casualties as an acceptable risk in the name of political stability. Humanity has established a new order, Chen continued, based on different principles. Species that threaten civilians face extinction. Species that cannot protect themselves accept supervision from those who can. Species that contribute to galactic stability receive the benefits of that stability. She returned to her seat. Her formal presentation concluded. The choice facing the Kethmori Republic is the same choice facing every species in the galaxy: adapt to the new reality or become irrelevant to it. Councillor Mordeth spoke hesitantly. And if we refuse to accept this new order? If the Council attempts to restore the previous system of governance? Chen's smile was polite but carried undertones that made everyone in the chamber understand exactly how precarious their position had become. Counselor, the Galactic Council exists because humanity permits it to exist. If you attempted to restore policies that failed to protect human interests, you would discover that our tolerance for ineffective governance has definite limits. The threat was delivered with the same diplomatic courtesy that had characterized Chen's original negotiations aboard the Harmony's Edge, but its implications were unmistakable. The Galactic Council now served to humanity's pleasure, existing only as long as it proved useful to human expansion efforts. A priority communication alert interrupted the increasingly tense discussion. The main viewer activated to show Admiral Morrison aboard what appeared to be the bridge of an impossibly large vessel. Behind her, Zektari could see control stations operated by beings from multiple species, all wearing human military uniforms. Ambassador Chen, I apologize for the interruption, but we've received word from the Kethmori government. They've formally requested human protection status and are prepared to sign the standard agreement terms. Chen nodded with satisfaction. Confirmed, Admiral. How long until we can deploy protective assets to their territory? The 4th Fleet is already in position. We can begin Ravager elimination operations within 6 hours of receiving formal authorization. The speed and efficiency of the response demonstrated the scope of human military preparation. Ships were positioned throughout the galaxy, ready to respond to threats or opportunities with minimal delay. The old galactic order had required weeks or months to coordinate military responses. Humanity could reshape the political landscape of entire sectors within hours. Proceed with authorization, Chen ordered. And, Admiral, ensure that Ravager leadership understands why their activities have drawn human attention. Morrison's smile was identical to the expression Zekthari had learned to fear. Understood, Ambassador. The Ravagers will receive a comprehensive education about the consequences of threatening human-protected populations. As the communication terminated, Zekthari realized that he was witnessing the final transformation of galactic civilization. The complex political structures that had evolved over millions of years of interstellar contact were being replaced by a simple hierarchy with humanity at the apex, backed by military capabilities that made resistance impossible and opposition irrelevant. "Is there any other business before the Council?" Thuvan asked wearily. Chen consulted her datapad once more. "Actually, yes. Humanity has identified several species in the Outer Rim territories that show promising potential for development. We'll be initiating first contact protocols with them over the next 6 months." "First contact under human authority?" Veximoth asked. "First contact under human protection," Chen corrected. "These species will have the opportunity to join galactic civilization under the new system rather than struggling through the chaos that characterized the previous era." Zekthari understood the implication. New species would never experience the old galactic order. They would emerge into a universe where human authority was established fact, where protection and supervision came as a package deal, and where the choice between security and sovereignty had already been made for them. As the session concluded and the representatives began filing out of the chamber, Chen approached Zekthari with something that might have been sympathy in her expression. "Ambassador, I want you to understand that none of this was our preference," she said quietly. "Humanity didn't want to become the galaxy's guardian. We wanted to find our place among equals to contribute to a civilization built on cooperation and mutual respect." She gestured toward the tactical display that still showed the scope of human influence across known space.